I stand here today because I believe in the power of dreams and the strength to pursue them.
The theater was already buzzing before his name was even called. People shuffled in their seats, judges whispered to one another, and the lights above the stage glowed softly, waiting for the next contestant who would step into the spotlight with a dream heavier than fear itself. Backstage, a young Filipino man stood alone, breathing slowly, his hands trembling just enough that he had to clench them together. He had waited his entire life for a moment like this, yet now that it was here, it felt unreal, like a scene playing in someone else's story. He thought of home, of narrow streets filled with the smell of fried bananas and rain-soaked concrete. He remembered singing softly as a child, copying voices he heard on old radios, mimicking sounds just for fun, never imagining those playful imitations would one day carry him across oceans. His family did not have much, but music had always been free, and it was everywhere. It was in the voices of neighbors, in the crackle of old recordings, and in the way his own voice changed when he closed his eyes and let himself feel the song. When the producer finally nodded and said it was time, his heart pounded so loudly he thought the microphones might pick it up. He walked onto the stage slowly, each step echoing in his ears. The applause was polite but cautious, the kind given to someone no one knew yet. He smiled nervously, waving a little, feeling suddenly very small in front of the massive crowd and the judges' table glowing beneath the lights. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, expression neutral but sharp. He had seen thousands of auditions, heard thousands of voices, and disappointment had taught him not to expect miracles. Beside him, the other judges watched with curiosity, trying to read the young man's face, trying to guess what kind of performance was about to unfold. The contestant introduced himself softly, his accent gentle but clear. He spoke about where he came from, about growing up listening to music that felt older than time. He mentioned Elvis Presley, and a few people in the audience chuckled quietly. Simon raised an eyebrow slightly. Elvis impersonations were not new. They were often gimmicky, exaggerated, and rarely convincing. Simon's lips tightened just a little, as if bracing himself. The young man nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped closer to the microphone. For a moment, there was complete silence. You could hear someone cough in the back of the theater. The contestant closed his eyes, and then he opened his mouth. The sound that came out did not belong to the body standing there. It was deep, rich, and unmistakably familiar. It carried the smooth, velvety tone of Elvis Presley, the king himself, as if time had folded in on itself and pulled a voice from decades ago into the present moment. Gasps rippled through the audience. Heads snapped up. Simon's eyes widened, his arms slowly uncrossing as he leaned forward. The young man's posture changed as he sang. His shoulders relaxed, his face transformed, and suddenly he was not a nervous contestant anymore. He was channeling something larger than himself. Every note was placed perfectly, every vibrato controlled, every subtle inflection echoing the legendary style that millions around the world recognized instantly. The audience began to whisper, then cheer, then fall silent again, afraid to miss even a single breath. The judges exchanged stunned glances. One of them covered their mouth in disbelief. Simon stared, his expression shifting from skepticism to shock in real time. As the song continued, the singer's confidence grew. He moved slightly, not overdoing it, just enough to let the rhythm guide him. His voice filled the theater, warm and commanding, yet smooth and emotional. It was not just an imitation. It felt like a resurrection of a sound people thought they would never hear live again. Simon shook his head slowly, a smile creeping across his face despite himself. He had built a career on brutally honest criticism, on calling out fake talent and shallow tricks. But this was neither fake nor shallow. This was something rare, something that made even him feel like a fan again. The final note hung in the air, perfectly sustained, then gently released. For half a second, there was silence. Then the entire theater exploded. The crowd leapt to their feet, screaming, clapping, some people wiping tears from their eyes. The applause was thunderous, overwhelming, and it did not stop. The young man opened his eyes, stunned by the reaction. His hands flew to his face, disbelief written all over him. He bowed slightly, again and again, overwhelmed by the noise, by the realization that something incredible had just happened. Simon stood up. That alone sent another wave of cheers through the crowd. Simon Cowell did not stand easily. When he did, it meant something. He looked at the contestant, shaking his head in amazement, then leaned toward his microphone. I have heard so many people try to sound like Elvis, Simon said slowly. And most of them are terrible. The audience laughed nervously, but the smile on Simon's face softened the words. But you, Simon continued, you don't try. You just are. The crowd roared again. The contestants' eyes filled with tears. Simon went on, praising the control, the tone, the authenticity. He admitted he had not expected much when the young man mentioned Elvis, but what he had just heard was extraordinary. He called it one of the most convincing and respectful performances of that style he had ever heard on the show. The other judges chimed in, each expressing disbelief and admiration. They talked about how rare it was to hear a voice that could transport an audience so completely. One judge mentioned feeling chills. Another said it felt like watching history come alive. When it came time to vote, there was no suspense. Yes followed yes, each one louder and more enthusiastic than the last. The final yes sent the contestant to the next round, but more importantly, it cemented his audition as a moment people would remember. As he walked off the stage, still shaking, the crowd continued to cheer. Backstage, he leaned against a wall, tears finally spilling over. All the years of practicing alone, all the doubts, all the moments when people laughed or told him it was unrealistic, they all rushed back at once. But now, they were drowned out by something stronger. Validation, hope. Clips of the audition spread rapidly online. People shared the video with captions full of disbelief. Comments poured in from around the world. Many said they closed their eyes and truly believed Elvis was singing again. Others praised the humility and emotion of the young man, saying it made the performance even more powerful. In interviews later, he spoke about his journey. He talked about growing up with limited resources, about listening to old tapes until they wore out, about singing not to impress but because it made him feel alive. He said Elvis represented freedom to him, a voice that broke boundaries, and he felt honored to carry that sound forward in his own way. Simon, when asked about the audition, admitted it reminded him why he loved doing the show. Moments like that, he said, were rare. They cut through the noise, through the cynicism, and reminded everyone that true talent could still surprise even the harshest critics. As the competition moved forward, expectations grew. People wondered if the young man could do it again, if lightning could strike twice. But regardless of what happened next, that first audition had already etched his name into the show's history. On that stage, under those lights, a young Filipino singer had opened his mouth and stunned the world. For a few magical minutes, time bent, legends echoed, and a dream once whispered in quiet rooms roared to life in front of millions.